We will show you some of the luckiest people who survived the impossible. These are the stories of people who faced death-defying situations and came out alive against all odds, from falling from the sky to surviving nuclear blasts. These are the incredible tales of resilience and fortune that will leave you speechless. Let's get started.
Hey everyone! Welcome to the Radiant Clues.
Number 10. VESNA VULOVIC, a Serbian flight attendant who holds the Guinness World Record for surviving the highest fall without a parachute. On January 26, 1972, she was on board a Yugoslav Airlines flight that exploded in midair over Czechoslovakia, killing all 27 other passengers and crew members. VESNA was the only survivor, having fallen 33,000 feet inside a section of the plane's tail. She suffered a fractured skull, broken legs, and severe internal injuries, but miraculously recovered after spending 27 days in a coma and several months in the hospital. She later said that she had no memory of the crash or the fall, and that she owed her survival to being in the right place at the right time. Number 9. Frank SELAK. This Croatian music teacher has escaped death not once, not twice, but 7 times in his life. His first brush with death was in 1962, when he was on a train that derailed and plunged into an icy river, killing 17 people. He managed to swim to shore with only a broken arm and hypothermia. A year later, he was on a plane that crashed and exploded, killing 19 people. He was blown out of a door and landed on a haystack, suffering only minor injuries. In 1966, he survived a bus crash that killed 4 people by jumping out of a window just before the bus plunged into a river. In 1970, he escaped a car fire by getting out of his car seconds before it exploded. In 1973, he survived another car fire caused by a faulty fuel pump. In 1995, he was hit by a bus but only suffered minor injuries. And in 1996, he avoided a head-on collision with a truck by swerving off a cliff and landing on a tree, while his car exploded below him. After all these near-death experiences, Frank finally got lucky in another way. He won $1 million in the lottery in 2003. Number 8. TSUTOMU Yamaguchi. Amazingly, this man experienced 2 nuclear explosions at Ground Zero and survived both to tell the tale. TSUTOMU Yamaguchi was a Japanese engineer who was on a business trip in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, when the United States dropped the first atomic bomb on the city. He was about 2 miles away from the blast center and suffered burns and temporary blindness from the explosion. He managed to find shelter and get medical treatment before returning to his hometown of Nagasaki the next day. On August 9th, he was at work when the second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. He was again about 2 miles away from the blast center and again survived with minor injuries. He later said that he felt like the luckiest man in Japan. He lived until 2010, dying at the age of 93 from stomach cancer. Number 7. Natalia Pasternak. One summer afternoon in June 2015, 55-year-old Natalia Pasternak and her 80-year-old friend Valentina Gorodetskaya were walking through the Siberian forest, collecting birch saps, unaware that this was a trip they might never have returned from. The pair had unknowingly crossed into the path of a huge brown bear, which made an initial beeline for Valentina's dog, before turning its attention to mother-of-2 Natalia. After attempting to separate the wild animal from her friend by hitting it with a stick, Valentina ran to find help, leaving Natalia to face the jaws of death. During the hour-long ordeal, the bear assumed that its now-mauled prey was finally dead, and began burying Natalia with earth and leaves in order to eat her later. Eventually, police arrived on the scene and noticed that the part-exposed woman was still breathing. With no other option, they shot the bear and unearthed Natalia, who later fully recovered in hospital. Despite being buried alive and intended as a brown bear's next meal, Natalia Pasternak lived to tell the terrifying tale and even posted an update on her social media with the caption, "Life is beautiful." Number 6. Phineas Gage. On September 13, 1848, then 25-year-old Phineas Gage was working as the foreman of a crew preparing a railroad bed near Cavendish, Vermont. He was using an iron tamping rod to pack explosive powder into a hole. Unfortunately, the powder detonated, sending the 43-inch long, 1.25-inch diameter rod hurling upward. The rod penetrated Gage's left cheek, tore through his brain, and exited his skull before landing 80 feet away. You would think that such a horrific injury would be fatal, but not for Phineas Gage. He not only survived the initial injury but was able to speak and walk to a nearby cart, so he could be taken into town to be seen by a doctor. He was still conscious later that evening and able to recount the names of his co-workers. He even suggested that he didn't wish to see his friends since he would be back to work in a day or two anyway. The recovery process after developing an infection. Gage spent September 23rd to October 3rd in a semi-comatose state. On October 7th, he took his first steps out of bed, and by October 11th, his intellectual functioning began to improve. Descriptions of Gage's injury and mental changes were made by Dr. John Martin Harlow. Much of what researchers know about the case is based on Harlow's observations. Harlow noted that Gage knew how much time had passed since the accident and remembered clearly how the accident occurred, but had difficulty estimating the size and amounts of money. Within a month, Gage was well enough to leave the house. Number 5. Julianne Koepke. Imagine being the sole survivor of a plane crash that killed 91 people, and then having to survive alone in the Amazon rainforest for 11 days. That's what happened to Julianne Koepke, a 17-year-old German-Peruvian student who was flying with her mother from Lima to Pucallpa on December 24, 1971. The plane was struck by lightning and broke apart in midair, sending Julianne plummeting 10,000 feet while still strapped to her seat. She miraculously survived the fall with only a broken collarbone, a gash on her arm, and a swollen eye. She then had to find her way out of the jungle, following a stream and eating fruits and insects. She also had to endure maggots infesting her wounds, a crocodile attack, and a near encounter with a group of armed men. She finally found a boat and a hut where she was rescued by local lumberjacks who took her to a nearby town. She later learned that her mother had also survived the crash but died of her injuries. Number 4. Harrison O'Keefe, a Nigerian cook who worked on a tugboat that capsized and sank in the Atlantic Ocean on May 26, 2013. He was one of the 12 crew members on board, but the only one who managed to survive. He was in the bathroom when the boat flipped over and trapped him in an air pocket. He had no food or water, only a bottle of Coke. He also had no light, except for a flashlight that soon ran out of batteries. He had to endure the cold, the darkness, and the fear of drowning or being eaten by sharks. He prayed and recited psalms from memory, hoping for a miracle. After 60 hours, he heard a knock on the wall and saw a diver's light. He grabbed the diver's hand and shouted, "I am the cook." The diver was part of a team that was sent to recover the bodies of the dead crew members. He was shocked to find O'Keefe alive and quickly brought him to the surface. O'Keefe had to spend another 60 hours in a decompression chamber before he could reunite with his family. Number 3. Eva Wisniewska, a German paraglider who survived being sucked into a thunderstorm while flying over New South Wales, Australia on February 14, 2007. She was preparing for the Paragliding World Championship when she encountered a massive storm cloud that pulled her up to an altitude of 32,000 feet, higher than Mount Everest. She was exposed to temperatures as low as -58 degrees Fahrenheit and low oxygen levels that caused her to lose consciousness. She also had ice forming on her body and equipment, making her heavier. She flew in the storm for about an hour before she regained consciousness and managed to steer herself out of the cloud. She landed safely about 40 miles from her original location, suffering from frostbite and bruises. She later learned that another paraglider, He Jongping, had died in the same storm after being lifted to 23,000 feet. Number 2. Roy Sullivan, a park ranger who worked at Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. He was also known as the Human Lightning Rod because he survived being struck by lightning 7 times between 1942 and 1977, more than any other person in recorded history. His first strike happened when he was hiding from a storm in a fire lookout tower. The tower was hit by lightning and set on fire, forcing him to flee. He was then hit by another bolt that burned his leg. His second strike happened in 1969 when he was driving his truck and lightning hit his window and knocked him unconscious. His third strike happened in 1970 when he was standing in his front yard and lightning hit a nearby power transformer and jumped to his shoulder. His fourth strike happened in 1972 when he was working at a ranger station and lightning set his hair on fire. His fifth strike happened in 1973 when he was patrolling the park and lightning hit him on the head, setting his hair on fire again. His sixth strike happened in 1976 when he was checking on a campsite and lightning hit him on the ankle. His seventh and final strike happened in 1977 when he was fishing in a pond and lightning hit him on the head, injuring his chest and stomach. He survived all these strikes with relatively minor injuries. but he suffered from hearing loss and nerve damage. He also claimed that he was avoided by people who feared he would attract lightning to them. Number 1. MAURO Prosperi, an Italian endurance runner who participated in the Marathon des Sables, a 6-day race across the Sahara Desert in Morocco in 1994. On the 4th day of the race, he was caught in a sandstorm that blew him off course and made him lose his way. He ran out of food and water and had to survive by drinking his own urine and eating bats and lizards. He also tried to kill himself by slitting his wrists, but his blood was too thick to flow out. He wandered for 9 days and 200 miles before he found a nomadic family that gave him water and took him to an Algerian military camp. He had lost 40 pounds and suffered from dehydration, sunburn, and hallucinations. He later said that he never gave up hope and that he was motivated by his love for his wife and children. He also said that he learned a valuable lesson from his ordeal: never take anything for granted, not even a glass of water. Well, that's all for today's video. We hope you enjoyed these amazing stories of people who survived the impossible. Which one impressed you the most? Let us know in the comments below.
Hey, thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe because more incredible content is on the way.